Welcome to the third episode of our Walkabout. So, I am Anil Chitrakar, and in this episode, what I want to do is take you through some of the older neighborhoods of Kathmandu that still have a little bit of greenery. So, today, as we walk, through these old gardens, we are going to talk about two plants that make up the Indra Jatra festival, which this year falls on September 1st. So, the first one is a lily, and so we just need to remember that in these old gardens, you will see three varieties or colors of this ginger lily. So, the white, the yellow and the red. And so, these three ginger lilies basically make up the main decor of the masks that are used for the Devi Nats, where the main characters are the Kumari, Chandi and Bhairab. And so, you can see that the three flowers basically are the key ingredient to making these amazingly colorful and beautiful masks. So, what we want to really encourage people to do is basically dedicate a little bit of space in their gardens to continue these plants, because they are an integral part of our cultural heritage. And so, here you see the yellow lily, it is a ginger lily. And so, what is really fascinating is that if you look at the buds, so these are the ones that are put on the mask, because the festival itself goes on for 8 days. And so, in those 8 days the flowers would bloom. And so, it is quite amazing that these old neighborhoods still understand that if I grow the flowers, then they go into the masks. If they go into the masks, then the festival happens. So, now the second flower is the coral jasmine. And so, the coral jasmine locally is known as the parijat. And so, this is quite an amazing flower, because this jasmine has this very amazing attribute that it flowers all night, and just as the dawn breaks, so the flowers fall to the ground. So, this flower is what Indra, the king of the heavens, so his mother needed these flowers to perform her ritual, and so asks Indra, the king of the heavens, to go down to earth and collect these flowers. And no surprise, he comes to Kathmandu Valley to collect these beautiful coral jasmine. And as he is starting to pick up these flowers, the local people catch him, thinking that he is an ordinary thief. And so, in the middle of Kathmandu, you will see the Indra being basically tied up onto a platform and basically paraded by the local people as a flower thief. So, now what happens is Airavat is the pet elephant of Indra. So, this white elephant comes from the heaven looking for Indra, and so you can see Airavat going through the crowds of Kathmandu trying to find the missing Indra. So, now that the mother notices that both the elephant and her son are missing, decides to go down to earth to look for both of them. Now, when the mother arrives in the Kathmandu Valley, so the local people recognize the mother, and then recognize Indra and the elephant, and decide to give them an amazing farewell party on their way back to heaven. So, this street festival, which is probably one of the most colorful, one of the most ornate festival in the world, is basically symbolic of the Indra Jatra, which is literally the farewell party given by the people of Kathmandu for Indra and his mother and his pet elephant to go back to heaven. Now, the people of Kathmandu are quite entrepreneurial. They know what is good for them, and so on the way back to heaven, the local people bargain with the mother and Indra that the rains which have basically allowed the rice to grow in the Kathmandu Valley to be basically replaced by the morning mist. And so this bargain is agreed upon, and so Indra, the mother and the elephant leave for heaven, but you will see in the coming days that the rain gets replaced by the mist. Now, why this mist is very important is that the festival, which takes place for 8 days in the streets of Kathmandu, you see a lot of food, you see a lot of alcohol. And so what people in Kathmandu do is basically use last year's harvest to have big feasts, invite a lot of people for the big feast, and then because there is still more grain left over, so part of it is fermented to make a local beer, and then part of it is distilled to make a local alcohol or raksi, or what we call ayla in the local Newari language. Now what we need to understand is, here you have all this rice growing in the fields, you have the surplus left over from last year. So as very practical people, what do you expect people to do with last year's rice, knowing that you now have to create space for the new harvest? And hence you will understand why there is so much food and why there is so much alcohol in this festival as well. So we live in this amazing historical city that has these amazing cultural events. So what we need to understand is that without these plants, without these flowers, many of these events would be irrelevant, because the very reason why the King of Heavens came to earth and the way we adorn the masks, they would all disappear. And so let us hope that someday we will be able to not have to use plastic flowers to tell these stories.